Okay, in the previous video, I taught how to identify the structural features of a sonnet. I will quickly review those right now. First thing you should look for is, does it have 14 lines? This poem does, if you count them out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So you know that it has 14 lines. The second thing that you do is you count the number of syllables per line. In the previous video, we realized it had 10 syllables. And we also talked about how its meter is iambic pentameter. Um, but with that said, we're gonna actually break this poem into its imagery and its parts. But one last thing is, for a Shakespearean sonnet, we also noticed that it had what were known as three quatrains followed by a rhymed couplet. And quatrains are 4 lines. So we have a set of 4 lines, 4 lines of the three. And then, of course, our good friend, the rhymed couplet at the end. What we're going to do for this video is we're actually going to try to figure out what this says. And what I found out as a young reader is that if you want to be successful at reading Shakespeare, you're going to have to read it a couple times. And you're going to have to envision who the speaker is. So, and you're going to figure out what kind of imagery are being said. And you're also going to have to look up words that you probably didn't look at before or understand. So in this video, I'm going to attempt to kind of show you what my brain does while I'm reading a poem and what I got to do to break it down. So I'm going to read it the first time, and I'm going to attempt to show you what I do for sketching to stretch, and also like what kind of keywords I'm looking for. So on the first read, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Well, in my mind, I have a speaker, and I can tell that the speaker is probably talking to somebody that they have some sort of affinity or like about them. So I'm like, oh, that gives me a clue. You're lovely and more temperate. You don't say that to just anybody. You say that to somebody that you're probably interested in liking and learning about. Shall I compare you to a summer's day? Question mark. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Well, one of the questions I would ask is, what does temperate mean? Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. All right, so I'm going to stop here. Should I compare you to a summer's day? I picture a speaker talking to somebody that they like. Forgive the handwriting and the pen function. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. So what do I envision in this? Well, I envision the wind going by, and I can see that the buds of May are rattling in the wind. There's flowers being blown around in the wind. And summer's lease hath all too short a date. What does that mean? Summer's lease hath all. What's a lease? What's an agreement to stay somewhere or to be somewhere? Oh, well, summer's too short. So let me get this straight. Shall I compare you to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Well, let's just pretend that I didn't know what that word meant and that I looked it up, but I actually do know what temperate means. And temperate means to be like, instead of being too hot, it's actually like just right. The weather isn't too sweltering or hot. It's just right. It's not too cold. It's not too hot. So look, should I compare you to a summer's day, a really hot summer's day? No, you're more lovely and more temperate, as in your weather's just right. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a lease. Wait, but May's in the spring, so he's saying you're even better than the spring too. So you're better than a summer's day, and you're better than the rough winds in May, and you're better than summer because summer is too short. A lot there. Continuing. Sometimes too often the hot eye of heaven shines. That's in summer. And I love the eye of heaven. That's a cool metaphor. Eye of heaven. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often his gold complexion is dim. Sometimes, like, complexion is his face. Sometimes he's dim. Continuing along here, and every fair from fair sometimes declines. So even people that are beautiful, and they lose it. over time. So every fair, by chance or by nature's changing course untrimmed. So I'm looking at this quatrain. So sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines. So sometimes it's too hot outside or it's too bright. And often his gold complexion is, sometimes it's too dim. And every fair from fair sometimes declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. As in, as time goes by, as time is untrimmed, people lose their beauty because they get older. Now, Shakespearean sonnet is unique, and you should look for one every single time. There's always this thing called a turn. It is a term where, like, when this is like this and this and this and this, he'd be like, there's a poem of his, in this time of year thou mayest in me behold, or when I have fears, or when I feel like I'm so depressed, but I think of you and everything is better. Here's kind of the turn. But your eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Mm. So in other words, that you own. That's the abbreviation, the fair that you own. But your eternal, your never-ending summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair, this beauty that you own. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. Wait a second. Nor shall death do what? Brag that you wander in his shade? That, death is a concept or an idea. It doesn't talk. Oh, wait. It's personification. Nor shall death brag you wander in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. Okay, so when in eternal lines, wait a sec, lines of poetry, because you grew because of the poem that I wrote for you. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So as long as everybody can breathe and they can see, they can read this, and you're still alive. So I just want to go back because I always have to read it a couple times and try to figure it out. So those were the images that I saw. Those were the things that I thought was going on. But let's see if they fit together. Shall I compare you to a summer's day? Should I or should I not? You're more lovely and more temperate. You're not too cold. You're not too hot. You're better. In spring, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. And this is my image of it. In summer's lease, that's all too short a day. The summer's too short. So I don't know if I should compare you to a summer's day. I'm not going to because you're better than a summer's day. The summer's too short anyway. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dim. So sometimes it's too bright, and sometimes it's too dim, and everything loses its beauty sometime because of life and time going by. But not you, baby. But your eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that beauty that you already own. Nor shall death brag that you wander in his shade, when eternal lines to time you grow. So long as men can breathe, their eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So I look at this poem and I look at, should I compare you to a summer's day? And that's a cool idea, the premise of this entire metaphor. Now, if I go forward then in looking at all of the evidence I had from the text on these things, what is the main idea? What is the main theme? Well, this particular poem expresses the idea that from one person to another, from the audience, or from the speaker to the audience, what was the main idea? And it was, you are more beautiful than a summer's day. And not only that, like, I look at these last couplets here, and now eternally, whoever was the recipient of this poem is going to be famous because Shakespeare wrote this poem to them, because the poem is still live, it's still open to interpretation. Here it is, 2018, um, years after the poem was, if he published these poems, well, they were actually published in his, the first folio after he died in 1616. He obviously wrote them before that. I mean, here we are, almost 400 years later or so, and we're still reading the same poem, looking at the cool similes and metaphors and imagery in it. So that's how you would approach a poem like this. But you have to bother with the words, and you have to bother with asking questions, and what's a lease, and why does he say half? And complexion is the facial expressions. And you have to kind of eternal and summer shall not fade and death bragging. You have to be able to create the image in your head of what's going on. If you don't take the time to look up the words and make the images, this poem will never make any sense. And that's true of any Shakespearean sonnet. That's why he challenges us, because he uses very elevated diction, and we don't speak like Shakespeare wrote. It was a beautiful language then. Nowadays, you've seen what's happened to the language. But anyway, that's how you would approach "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?"